What if the biggest threat to zero waste is not a lack of ideas, but the systems we continue to accept? Can we trust the systems responsible for managing our materials? Welcome back to this week's edition of Environmental News, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm Stacy Savage, aka the Texas Trash Talker, founder and CEO of Zero Waste Strategies. This week comes from Miami-Dade County, Florida, where officials have unveiled a new zero waste master plan designed to reshape how the county manages materials over the next several years. The plan was released after approximately 4 years of development and dozens of public workshops involving municipalities, businesses, tourism and hospitality representatives, environmental organizations, technical experts, and residents. It includes 31 coordinated strategies focused on reducing waste, expanding recycling, improving organics management, increasing diversion, and advancing a more circular economy. This is significant because Miami-Dade is dealing with a very large waste stream and limited disposal capacity. The county generates more than 5 million tons of waste every year, and landfill capacity is expected to become a serious concern within approximately 5 years. That creates massive urgency. A zero waste plan can sometimes be little more than a vision statement, but Miami-Dade's plan is being presented as a long-term implementation roadmap. Its stated goal is to divert and recover as much material as possible from landfills by 2040, one of the most ambitious targets to increase the county's recycling rate from approximately 32% to 77% by 2039. That's a dramatic increase, and reaching it will require much more than telling residents to simply recycle. It will require better collection systems, more clear education, improved contamination control, expanded recycling markets, organics diversion, reuse programs, commercial waste reduction, and stronger coordination between the county and its municipalities. The plan also expands the traditional idea of reduce, reuse, recycle. It includes strategies built around refusing unnecessary materials, redesigning products and packaging, and imagining how resources are used throughout their entire life cycle. That broader approach is so important because for decades, waste policy has often focused on what happens after a product is discarded. But the greatest opportunities usually exist before the material becomes waste. A county can make progress by reducing unnecessary packaging, supporting refill and reuse programs, preventing food waste, expanding repair, and helping businesses change purchasing and operating practices. Miami-Dade's plan also links waste reduction to climate resilience and economic opportunity. That makes sense because waste management is connected to transportation and land use, energy, public health, local jobs. A stronger circular economy can create employment in repair, reuse, recycling, composting, material processing, remanufacturing, and product design, and preserve landfill capacity. But there's an important reality check here. A plan is not the same as implementation. Miami-Dade will need funding, staffing, enforcement, reliable data, regional partnerships, and clear accountability. Residents and businesses will need convenient services, and municipalities will need support to adopt consistent policies. County officials will need to report publicly on whether the strategies are actually reducing disposal and increasing materials recovery. The county's recycling target is very ambitious, and progress should be measured every year, not just revisited in 2039. How much waste is being generated per person? How much food waste is being composted or recovered? How much material is actually recycled into new products? And how contaminated are the recycling and organic streams? Those are some metrics that will tell us whether this is a real transformation or simply a very impressive document. For now, Miami-Dade deserves credit for recognizing that their landfill capacity is finite and that the old disposal model is not enough. The county is putting reduction, reuse, recycling, organics diversion, and circularity into one coordinated framework. And now, on to our bad story. It comes from California, where two bills related to compostable plastics and labeling failed to clear a key appropriations deadline and will not advance this legislative session. AB 1812 would have prohibited the sale of products described as compostable or home compostable if they were made entirely or partially from plastic. The bill passed the California Assembly by a 64-1 vote before moving to the Senate. Senate Bill 1031 took a different approach. It would have tightened labeling requirements for compostable products so consumers could more clearly distinguish them from non-compostable products. It also included a study of potential health impacts associated with degraded compostable plastics and chemical additives. Neither bill cleared appropriations. From one perspective, this is a legislative defeat for people who wanted stronger rules around compostable packaging and more clear labeling. From another perspective, though, it's being celebrated as a victory by the Biodegradable Products Institute, or BPI, which opposed both bills. BPI argued that stopping these bills benefits composters, communities, consumers, and the environment. That disagreement is important because the word compostable is at the center of a complicated debate. Compostable products are often marked as alternatives to conventional plastic, but whether a product is genuinely compostable depends on where it's used, whether it can be collected, whether a composting facility actually accepts it, whether it breaks down under real-world conditions, and whether it creates contamination or chemical concerns. A product may be certified compostable under industrial composting conditions, but still fail to break down in a backyard composting pile. It may also be technically compostable, but not accepted by the local organics program. When consumers see the word compostable, they may assume the product belongs in any composting bin. That assumption can create contamination and make the material difficult for composters to process. Now, at the same time, composters and compostable product advocates argue that well-designed compostable products can serve useful purposes, particularly in food service systems where packaging is contaminated with food and where reusable systems may not yet be practical. A blanket restriction could remove products that some composting systems consider useful, but weak or confusing labeling can also undermine compost quality and consumer trust. The failure of these two bills means California has not resolved this tension. The state still needs a clear framework that answers several questions. One, what does compostable mean under California law? Two, what evidence should a manufacturer provide? Three, should a product be accepted only if the local composting infrastructure exists? Four, how should home compostable products be tested? Five, what chemicals and additives should be restricted? And six, who pays when compostable packaging contaminates a load? Consumers cannot make responsible choices if labels are confusing. Businesses can't make good procurement decisions if the rules are inconsistent. And composters can't produce a clean, marketable product if materials enter the stream without clear standards. The next legislative effort should bring composters, municipalities, product manufacturers, environmental health experts, waste haulers, and advocates to the table. Compostable products should not automatically be treated as a solution just because they are labeled compostable, but they should not be automatically excluded without examining where they can provide a legitimate benefit. The goal here should be truth in labeling, protection of compost quality, reduced chemical hazards, and policies that prioritize reduction and reuse before single-use alternatives. And now for the ugly. This week's ugly story involves the EPA's electronic manifest system known as e-manifest. The system was created to track the movement of hazardous waste shipments and make that information more accessible and transparent. But according to a new EPA Office of Inspector General review, thousands of errors in the system's data have undermined confidence in its reliability. The central problem? The system is not fully electronic in practice. Although it is called e-manifest, approximately 99.6% of submissions in 2024 were data and image submissions. That means facilities submitted paper manifests, which were often handwritten, and treatment, storage, and disposal facilities manually entered the information into the electronic system. Less than 0.5% of hazardous waste shipment forms were natively electronic. This creates multiple opportunities for error. Inspectors found invalid generator identification numbers and invalid identification numbers for treatment, storage, and disposal facilities. Approximately 40% of generator IDs and about half of the facility IDs reviewed from 2022 to 2024 were invalid. The report also found serious errors in reported shipment volumes. The 100 largest volume errors caused the system to reflect more than 1,600 times the amount of hazardous waste actually shipped. In one example, an entry used tons instead of pounds, creating a massive overstatement. The report did not say that every shipment record was inaccurate or that all of the reported waste volumes were wrong. It found errors of varying significance, and the errors involving identification numbers represented less than 1% of the total tonnage covered by the system. But the existence of major volume errors still undermines confidence in the data regulators, communities, and researchers may rely on. A hazardous waste tracking system has one basic job: to provide a reliable record of what was shipped, where it came from, where it went, and how much was involved. If the data is inaccurate, it becomes harder to answer basic questions after a spill, a fire, illegal shipment, or contamination event. Where did the waste originate? Which transporter handled it? Which facility accepted it? Was the amount reported realistic? Was the waste sent to an authorized facility? These are not minor details, folks. The Inspector General concluded that data quality problems will likely continue until electronic manifests are fully adopted. The EPA agreed with recommendations to establish maximum volumes for different types of hazardous waste containers and to add verification checks that can identify when reported volumes exceed likely container capacity. That's a step in the right direction, but the larger lesson is that digitizing a broken process does not automatically make it reliable. The federal government needs to move toward direct electronic entry, standardized data, validation checks, user accountability, and public transparency. It also needs to ensure that small generators and smaller facilities have the technology and training necessary to participate. A fully electronic system could reduce transcription errors and illegible records, but it must be designed for people who actually use it in the field. Hazardous waste tracking is one of the areas where the public should be able to expect the highest level of accuracy. These materials can threaten workers, communities, water, soil, and air. If the data management system designed to track them cannot be trusted, that's a serious environmental and governance problem. This week's stories all point to the same conclusion: responsible waste management depends on more than just good intentions. The future of zero waste is not just about collecting more materials, it's about designing systems that people can trust. We need to be able to trust that a recycling claim is accurate, that a compostable product will not contaminate the composting stream, that hazardous waste shipments are being tracked correctly, that zero waste planning will actually reduce disposal instead of simply changing the language around it. We have the technology to do better, and we have the expertise. What we need now is the commitment to build systems that are transparent, measurable, and centered on prevention. Because the goal is not to make waste management look more sophisticated. The goal is to create less waste, protect the people doing the work, preserve the value of our materials, and prevent pollution before it happens. I'm Stacy Savage, aka the Texas Trash Talker, founder and CEO of Zero Waste Strategies, and this has been Environmental News: the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. If this episode helped you understand the connections between zero waste planning, composting policy, and hazardous waste tracking, well, share it with someone who cares about the future of our waste systems. And remember, the best waste is the waste that we never create. I'll see you next time. Bye.